Hello all and welcome to podcast number 48. It's me, Maggie West. I'm back again and I'm starting to get into the swing of this a little bit, so I'm glad to have your company on our March u3a podcast. As always, we've been working hard behind the scenes on your behalf to source interesting experiences and stories from across the network. We want to share them with you over the next 30 minutes. So stay with me. Here goes. You'll hear about the world of alphabets, not just the 26 that we're using in our part of the world.
In India, you've got, I think, the rupee notes have the word for rupee in something like 15 or 20 languages.
Learn what it takes to form a new u3a, some tips and some advice.
They sent out a WhatsApp message on my behalf saying that we are forming a Newham u3a. Would anybody like to volunteer? All of a sudden, I've got a committee.
Now, for Jane Austen fans, find out what makes her writing so special.
For me, the power and the importance of her writing is that she provides us with wonderful mirrors to help us look at ourselves, as did Shakespeare.
And finally, have you ever dreamed what the life of an airline jet pilot is like?
That buzz, you don't get that as an airline pilot. You know, you get your monthly roster and you go and fly your rostered flights. I mean, I compare it really to being the bus driver as opposed to a limousine driver, you know, where everything is ad hoc.
So lots to tempt you to stay tuned for the duration. Let's find out more. Have you ever wondered why some languages have so many letters, while others, we just get by with a few? Or why English spelling seems to make no sense at all? From the Rosetta Stone to the quirks of pronunciation, alphabets shape the way we communicate, sometimes in surprising ways. Do you remember when you were at school? I loved English and I loved consonants, vowels, adjectives. I was fascinated. Join us as we explore it further, though, because we want to think about the fascinating world of writing systems, accents, and the hidden logic, or sometimes even lack of it, behind the letters we use every day. A tour of the world's writing systems prompted our reporter, Joanne Watson, to find out more from the speaker and international translator. He's a real expert, Chris Thompson. So she started with the basic. She asked him just how many alphabets are there?
It's obviously less than the number of languages because many languages share the same alphabet. Of the major languages of the world, you're looking at the Latin Roman alphabet for English and so on, Cyrillic for Russian, Ukrainian and Bulgarian and various others, Greek, obviously one of its own, and then Arabic covers not just the Arabic language, but a whole load of other languages. And then Chinese, Japanese, Korean. In India, you've got, I think, the rupee notes have the word for rupee in something like 15 or 20 languages.
My name begins with a J, and I have been to a couple of countries that don't have J's in their alphabet.
Of course, that touches on correspondence or lack of it between the writing system and the sounds of the language. I mean, even in English, we're missing letters for common sounds like th and the. And even then it's ambiguous because there's a voiced the, as in the word the, and there's an unvoiced th, as in thin, which are two different sounds, which potentially could be two different letters. So that's another whole area of interest, which is how well or how badly a writing system reflects the sounds of the language that it's representing.
And then, of course, you've got accents.
Yeah, and accents can be regarded differently in different languages. Some will regard it as a simple modification of a letter, and other languages regard it as a separate letter altogether. There's not actually an authority that says this is the way we say things. It's more of an agreement, a convention, that this is the way we've done it. And those things change over time, obviously, as well.
Now, I was doing a bit of homework not wanting to put you on the spot, but I came across the fact that the Khmer language has 74 letters, of which 33 are consonants and 41 are vowels.
I might be wrong, but certainly a number of languages in the Far East are what they call tonal languages. So, you know, when you ask a question as opposed to make a statement, the tone of what you say may be rising or flat or falling or something like that. Even just a single word, coffee or coffee, mean different things. I don't know, but it could be that the counting of those vowels in Khmer could include the tonal variants. But then there are a lot of vowel sounds. And, you know, in English, we've got 5 letters that we call vowels and a Y that occasionally stands in for a vowel sound. But there are many, many more vowel sounds than there are the 5 vowels that we recognise in English. I mean, just to take an example, I'm up here in Yorkshire, but you can probably tell that I'm not originally from Yorkshire because I said up here in Yorkshire. That's 2 vowel sounds for 1 letter with exactly the same meaning. So again, it goes back to the correspondence between the sounds of the language and the writing system, which is tenuous in both directions sometimes.
Whilst we're talking about conventional letters, I mean, I've gone past the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum, which is an alphabet of sorts, but is symbols, isn't it?
Are letters all symbols anyway? They're just scratches that represent something. It wasn't strictly speaking a code. It was an undeciphered language. In other words, it had been written down, no longer anybody who can interpret it from the written word. And it was only the Rosetta Stone which they suddenly realised was, I think it's 3 different languages, but saying the same thing. Because one of them was ancient Greek, which was known, you can then start to read through, well, therefore, if it's all the same meaning, we know that the meaning of this sentence in the unknown script must be something to do with this. And we can start working out correspondences. But I mean, it takes a better brain than you or me to work out that stuff.
Of all the languages that you study and that you're obviously very conversant with, do you have a favourite?
Although I don't speak them, I like the elegance, if you like, of the Indian languages, both in terms of the script itself, but also the way that the pronunciation is very easily determined from the spelling. So it's very unlike English in that sense, in that if you come across a word you've never seen before and you know the rules for how these letters are pronounced, you're 99% likely to pronounce it correctly. Whereas in English, that's really not the case at all. I mean, like epitome, you'd never guess it was pronounced like that from seeing it written down. I was in the 20s before I discovered it wasn't epitome.
Yes, well, I've seen furore and furore, and I was watching an episode of Murder, She Wrote, I think, and the character was saying that their room had been burglarized. I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with burgled? You know, why are we adding on these extra syllables?
The furore thing, they even leave the E off in American English, F-U-R-O-R, as opposed to F-U-R-O-R-E in British English.
And why do they take U out of colour?
You don't really need it, do you?
No, but then you don't need the I's in burglarized.
I know. I've always found that trying to apply logic to language like that is a bit futile, really.
So language is constantly evolving, and so are the alphabets we use to express it. Every writing system, it seems, has a story to tell. So thanks to Chris Thompson and our reporter Joanne Watson for taking us on a journey through alphabets. Keep an eye out, why don't you, for those curious quirks of language around you. Absolutely fascinating and changing all the time. Now let's look at something very different. You know, the u3a membership in the UK, I was astounded to find out that we've got 400,000 members. Yeah, and we're always looking at ways of encouraging others to join. It's a lifelong learning journey, so we want to encourage even more people to come along. So therefore, I was thinking, how many of you are thinking of, you're just toying around with the notion of starting up your own local u3a? Maybe you're in an area where there's one that's a little bit too far to get to. Well, here's one success story of just what happened when someone did just that. So listen up and maybe think about taking notes. It may just prove to be the encouragement you need. Learning for the joy of learning. So starting a new u3a in Newham in London has been an exciting journey, bringing together a diverse and enthusiastic group of people. A strong committee always needed a clear vision and a focus on inclusivity in this group. They quickly gained that momentum and provided a community spirit. Determination can overcome the usual challenges of setting up a new branch. So we wanted to find out a bit more. And Martin Levin went along to Newham in East London and he spoke to Peter Chung, who did just that.
Your first 32, how did you recruit them? Well, to be honest, I mean, a number of them are committee members already. The other ones are sort of friends, spouse, partners, press gang into joining. But this year, I'm also co-chair of the resident advisory group of Newham's Aging Well strategy. So they sent out a WhatsApp message on my behalf saying that we are forming a Newham u3a. Would anybody like to volunteer? All of a sudden, I've got a committee full of very useful, resourceful people.
That's fabulous, because normally you don't get committees or volunteers. You have to tap people on the shoulder and say, will you come on board?
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. I mean, yesterday we had our first presentation talk coffee afternoon by a committee member, and he's been a lecturer at King's College London. So we have two committee members with PhDs with their particular subject areas. So yesterday, Martin gave a talk on linguistics and the origins of languages. And it was absolutely fascinating talk. So we have a whole series of talks lined up for next year.
So 1 year ahead you're working now. Excellent. You've done very, very well.
Always forward thinking. So I think come spring, I mean, nothing will happen in December generally. You know, people are busy and
they hibernate, don't they?
Yes. So I think springtime will be a good time to really get going. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. And that's in a very short space of time.
The only thing I would say is we had our first committee meeting back in May. There's a lot of, I wouldn't call it red tape, but they're necessary documentation and, policies to sort out, and then working with u3a to set ourselves up properly. So we all have our own individual constitution. We are all trustees of the organization. We are governed by the Charities Act, in England and Wales. So there are, serious responsibilities. So set it up right, and go through all the hoops and, yeah.
How long did it take you to read the terms and conditions?
I was very lucky because the secretary, Rosemary, she's a retired senior civil servant. She happens to love policies and documentation, constitution. So basically, we don't have to write anything from scratch. So there are templates from u3a.
Copy and paste?
Not 100%. There are options you can take, but you do need to read it, make sense of it, and then adopt them.
Is it written in plain, simple English, or is it jargonese? Sir Humphrey and Yes Minister.
I think they try their best to have them in plain English. They're reasonably easy to understood, but I think there are certain terms and conditions that you need to make sure that it's lawyer. But so, as a chairperson, sometimes I know that I'm so angry. Sometimes I want to do everything. I want to get this thing. I want to get things done. But sometimes you need to cultivate the culture, the atmosphere, and also empower people to do their bit. Let them learn.
Yeah. The only problem with some committee meetings is you delegate the tasks to somebody, Next month they come back and you go, how you got on? And they go, I've written a letter. I'm waiting for a reply. Does that still go on?
Yes. I think, I think some of us are more proactive than others, going out to see people, it's all about engaging with the local community, with organization, because it's difficult because we don't have money. We don't have very much resources. So we need to go engage with different organizations and say, look, can we use your facilities and then give a little back? Same as a yoga class I started. So I do a chair yoga for their over 50s club. So this is what I'm giving you, and then we can use the premises for our yoga class. So a little bit of give and take, I think.
So finding premises, is it a problem?
Oh, huge problem. Yesterday, the presentation, we wanted a room in Newham Library. Basically, we had to pay £40 to hire the room for 2 hours. Now, as a one-off, it's okay as a start, but on a long-term basis, it's not sustainable.
No, you have to break even for a start for that.
Yeah. And we don't charge people on a per session basis.
Ah.
So we want to keep the fees as low as possible. Annual membership is only £15, £5 of which goes to the national organisation to use their systems, public liability, insurance, and all the rest of it. So net, we get £10, which is not a great deal you can do, 32 members. So we'll see.
Sometimes you introduce a voluntary contribution.
Yes. We have a voluntary contribution, which one member who shall remain nameless, one committee members, 2 months ago, just wrote us a check for £500 personal contribution.
They're the sort of people, that's lovely, yeah.
Yeah.
But you probably, because you're in an area where it's been high unemployment, and people are very reluctant to put their hands in their pockets.
Yes, we do have a concession. I mean, if you're on pension credit or whatever, we charge you £10. But if someone genuinely comes to us and say, "Look, I really love to join, but I really can't afford it," I would never turn anyone away. Sometimes you turn around and say, "Well, do you want to make a contribution? Give me a £1 coin per month when you come to events. I'm happy to accept that." But so far, I mean, no one's come to me and say, "I'd like to join, but I can't afford it." But I'd like to think that if someone does that, I won't turn them away.
But it generates goodwill, and that person can introduce a benefactor.
Yes. So there are some very generous people, So I'm very grateful.
Well, now you did hear about some of the hurdles of funding, premises, organisation, and you will encounter those as well, I'm sure, should you take this journey. Newham u3a is off to a promising start, and it's set to grow and thrive, offering that lifelong learning. And of course, you've got to think about the social connections for its members as well. Very, very rewarding. So now think about it. What's stopping you? Right, now let's change the tempo here a little bit more, because I know that amongst you we've got many people who love reading. So I want you to guess who this is. Her image appears on our £10 notes, and celebrations are taking place throughout the UK and the world, in fact, this year to mark 250 years of her birth. Who do you think I'm talking about? No prizes really for guessing. Many of you will have guessed, of course, it's Jane Austen. She's one of the most beloved writers in English literature, and weren't we really lucky to have her? Her 6 novels, written in the early 1800s, have captivated generations of readers, and I'm sure you're amongst them. But this is worldwide, because she's got great wit. She's very biting satire and acute social commentary, very, very conscious of the social interactions in her world. It's a truth universally acknowledged that a young man in possession of a large fortune must be in want of a wife. That's probably one of the most often quoted lines from Jane Austen's work, and it really does exemplify her wonderful use of irony. So what is it that makes her writing so special? Michael McConville is the leader of a u3a online Jane Austen reading group, and he's a real expert and very passionate about her work. So Susie Hodges caught up with him recently and began by asking him why Jane Austen novels are so highly regarded and how do they contribute to our overall literary heritage?
Well, she is the only novelist that I know of that's actually on the currency on the notes. So she enjoys very high prestige as a writer of life as it was lived in her own time. But obviously it has a universal appeal because she goes into so much evocative detail of the relationships that we all have with one another. For me, the power and the importance of her writing is that she provides us with wonderful mirrors to help us look at ourselves, as did Shakespeare, and she's frequently mentioned as standing alongside Shakespeare in her greatness.
She only wrote 6 novels, though, in her short life. Which is your favourite and why?
That's so very difficult. I think Pride and Prejudice almost certainly, followed very closely by Mansfield Park, because what I've learned from Pride and Prejudice is about the nature of love, the dynamic of love. And the book was originally supposed to be called First Impressions, and a challenge to the whole notion of falling in love and love at first sight, actually, and distrusting the sense that first impressions are the best impressions, which is, we have a saying in the English language about that, actually. But Jane Austen was far more reticent and understood that the true basis of a most wholesome love is rooted, first of all, in affection. And affection has to grow. Our knowledge of another person takes time. And the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy takes time. And the beauty of their relationship lies precisely in their antagonism to one another. Because through the antagonism, they have to learn not only the other person, but they have to learn themselves as well. And it's out of that antagonism that they start to learn themselves better as well as the other person better. And that's where the affection grows. And it's out of the affection that love, true love, grows.
Some critics have dismissed Jane Austen's novels as too narrow in scope and say they're merely historical romances. How would you answer such criticisms?
I don't see her as a romantic writer at all, actually. I would say she's a classical writer, not in the sense of writing timeless books, which she did, but classical in the sense that there is equilibrium and assuredness about the blessedness of life itself. I would dare to say that being a careful reader of Jane Austen is a very important part of your capacity to appreciate her novels. Her very first novel she wrote, Northanger Abbey, in many ways it can be regarded as an education in how to read novels and how reading itself can be corrupting. And I see romantic novels in Jane Austen's sights as potentially corrupting of people's finer sensibilities. Also, another criticism of the idea that Jane Austen's novels are romances is that their endings are not unambiguous. In a romantic novel, as I understand it, the ending is we all live happily ever after. One of the things I would dare to say is that many of the films that are made of Jane Austen's novels sadly fall into romanticising them. To some serious degree, they falsify the very concern that Jane Austen has about the corrupting influence of the popular romantic novel. Catherine Morland in Northanger Abbey absorbs herself in her reading at the cost of not properly reflecting on the circumstances around her. And what I believe Jane Austen helps us to do is to teach us how to reflect upon the circumstances that we are immediately invested in.
Jane Austen is especially famous, as we all know, for her satire and biting wit, and she's loved for that. Are there any particular lines or quotes from her books that you can share with us that illustrate this?
Yes, actually, there's one particular one that I'm very fond of. It occurs quite early on in Northanger Abbey. Catherine Morland meets for the first time the hero, Mr. Henry Tilney, and the conversation is the most delightful beginning to their relationship because he asks her all the proper questions. Have you been to the theatre? Have you been to the baths? Have you been here? Have you been there? And how did you find it? You know, he goes through all the ritual proprieties. But then he says, now I must give one smirk and then we may be rational again. And this is wonderful because it undercuts the pretense that so many of our social engagements can ride upon. Henry Tilney, when he says, and then we may be rational again, is saying, actually, then we might be able to speak more truly, directly, because we have fulfilled the customary standards of behaviour, but let us not be deceived into thinking that they are all that our interactions are about.
Are you planning to attend any of the celebrations, be it festivals, exhibitions, workshops, talks, or tours, etc., that are taking place in the UK throughout this year to mark the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth?
I personally am not. I'm a rather reclusive chap. What I am intending to do is to go to Winchester Cathedral, where she is buried, a sort of private pilgrimage. I believe that Jane Austen would have found the celebrity culture that has been built up around her quite strange and even alien to her deeper sentiments. But I wish well to everyone that actually does participate in all of that.
What would you say is the secret of Jane Austen's lasting appeal with readers so many years, after when she lived?
I would say her abiding sense of humanity and compassion that comes through the careful reading of her novels.
Jane's novels still resonate with readers worldwide, and long may they do so for generations to come. I'm sure many of you have children, grandchildren, people in your family who really do rate the work that she's done. So it's got a long history of pleasure that it brings to everyone. So a big thank you to our reporter, Susie Hodges, and to Michael McConville for sharing his passion and in-depth knowledge about the writing of Jane Austen. Delightful. Now, we've got very diverse stories and experiences, and this one excites me. My background was flying in an airline. So flying commercial airliners may be the dream of many pilots, but for some, the real thrill lies in the fast-paced, unpredictable world of executive aviation. Now, can you imagine getting a last-minute call, grabbing your bag and jetting off to Paris or Rome at a moment's notice? No rigid schedules, no repetitive routes, and just pure aviation excitement. Bob Wells caught up with the former executive pilot, Nick Glover, who's had an extensive career in business aviation. And in fact, he now is an instructor with Aerobility, a charity which offers disabled people the opportunity to fly an aeroplane. What a great cause is that. He's flown world leaders, royalty, A-list celebrities even, and has many stories and close calls to tell. So buckle up as we take off into the fascinating world of private jet aviation.
Did you ever want to fly larger commercial aircraft?
Not really, no.
It was just the way the path took you, I guess.
Well, that's right. Having worked in the executive aircraft department and worked with small aircraft, I say small aircraft, I mean some of the executive aircraft were airliners. But I got into that mindset where I loved the excitement of the phone going and saying, right, get to the airfield, you're going to Paris or you're going to Rome. That buzz, you don't get that as an airline pilot. You get your monthly roster and you go and fly your rostered flights. I mean, I compare it really to being the bus driver as opposed to a limousine driver, where
yes,
everything is ad hoc. So, I just loved that buzz. And my wife could always tell if I had been called out for a trip because she could hear me whistling while I was packing my bag upstairs,
Tell us a little bit about the exclusive side of aviation, Nick.
Yeah, it's the people that we deal with, really. I mean, such a wide variety of people. And the beauty of it is that you actually get to see well-known, famous people that you see on the films and on the television every day, from royalty to government ministers to film stars and pop stars, and you get to see them one-to-one, not for a very long time, but you really get to see what people are really like, and I quite like that aspect of it. And especially in those days when, I mean, on a regular basis, I would say have a 15-minute car ride with, Nelson Mandela or Henry Kissinger, world figures. And I get 15 minutes to chat to them, one-to-one. But it might be, a pop star. Frank Bruno was great. I mean, I spent 20 minutes with Frank Bruno. What a lovely man he was. And seeing that aspect of people, you do see a downside. You see the ones that are actually full of themselves and, they really think they're something special and talk down to people. But I tend to not worry about them so much. I mean, we had the contract to fly the royal family, for example. So flying people like who was then Prince Charles or Princess Anne and ultimately the Queen, it was complete joy. And it was, I would say, the ultimate for my whole flying career, really. I mean, you don't get better than flying the Queen, you have to say. And I mean, I had a really quite a funny experience once when I had to go and pick up Gordon Brown from a flight and drive him to the VIP suite. And as he got in my car, he said, I've got to get to a telephone. I've had a message to say number 10 needs to speak to me urgently. So I said, well, we're about a 10-minute drive away from the suite. So I said, there are no telephones. He said, no, it's urgent. So I said, well, the only phone I have, you're very welcome. You can borrow my mobile phone. So I handed it to him. Now, at that moment, I was between jobs and I was waiting for a phone call from the chief pilot of a company who was going to invite me for interview. So it was quite a critical phone call. Anyway, Gordon Brown was on the phone. He was chatting away to somebody at number 10. And then he said to me, oh, they need to check some figures and ring me back. He said, what's the number? I said, oh, they'll have it because you've rung them. So just tell them to ring that number. So we were sitting there, stony. I have to tell you, Gordon Brown's not a chatter. We were sitting there, stony silence. And after a few minutes, the phone rang and he answered it. And he handed the phone to me and he said, it's for you. And it was the chief pilot of this company to arrange my interview. And he then said to me, who's that answering your mobile phone? And when I said, oh, that was Gordon Brown, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he thought I was being, flippant. And I came that close to not getting the job, I mean, I have a fund of stories like that, with funny things that happened, particularly with, different celebrities. Jimmy Carter had just ceased to be the president, and he became this envoy for the UN with special interest in developing countries, particularly countries like Ethiopia and Somalia. And he'd been lent a private Boeing 727 from a Middle Eastern bank to fly down to the Middle East. I was dispatching the flight at Heathrow, and talking to the captain, we noticed that one of the tyres had a flat spot where on landing it hadn't spun up properly and it had just burnt the rubber straight down to the canvas. And the captain said to me, well, there's no way we can, go down to Ethiopia with the airplane in this state. He said, and I haven't got a spare. He said, can you come up with a spare? So shot back to the office, ringing round all the maintenance units. So there weren't many people operating 727s, but so we were going to have to ship a spare wheel in from the US, which was going to take 24 hours. But one of my colleagues gave a whoop, and he was talking to the Air France maintenance manager, who said, yes, I do have a wheel assembly in my store. And he said, oh, great, can we have it? And the chap said, nope. And I said, well, why not? You're not even operating 727s in, and we can replace it within 24 hours. But this chap was absolutely adamant, no way could we have this wheel. So in the meantime, of course, the passengers were turning up at the VIP lounge expecting to go on a flight. So I was dispatched round there to break the news. But of course, the thing about these VIP people is they don't like dealing with bad news. They're great at meeting and greeting. But so after I'd explained the situation, they said to me, well, you know the score. You'd better come in and tell him. So I was wheeled in to see the great man. And bearing in mind at the time, he had a very, very high profile. He'd only just been president of the US. So, he was as famous as Donald Trump is now. And and as soon as he saw me, he knew there was a problem. So I walked over to him, and I'm a great believer, if there's bad news, don't pussyfoot around it, give it straight. So I told him exactly the problem, and I said, there is a wheel on the airfield, but the manager won't release it, so we're going to have to fly one in, and it is going to be a 24-hour delay. And he just listened quietly, didn't say anything, and he put down his coffee cup, and he just said to me, so where's the man with the wheel? So I said, oh, he's in an office not very far away. So he said, well, will you take me to him? And with his very southern drawl. So, yeah, of course. So he came out. He got into his Lincoln Continental limousine with the flags at the front and police outriders. I was in my little British Airways car. And we drove round the airside buildings, around the back of the Queen's Building and Terminal 2, and pulled up outside the maintenance office. Now, the interesting thing, to get to talk to the manager, he worked in a little office, but it was at the end of the restroom that was used by all the loading staff, all the ramp staff, the engineers and the baggage loaders and that sort of thing. So to get to speak to him, we had to walk into the restroom. So it was just Jimmy and myself. We walked into the restroom. And it really was like John Wayne walking into the saloon. The whole place just went really quiet. And we had to walk the whole length of this restroom to get to the manager, who he spoke to the men through a little grill, like a post office type grill. So he could see us coming. And Jimmy, he slowly walked the whole length of this building. And the poor manager, his eyes were getting like saucers, as we came. And it just got to the grill, and he leant down and he said, are you the man with the wheel? And the guy just nodded. He said, can I have it? And the guy nodded again. And he just said, thank you very much. And we just turned around and walked back out. And he had a biggest grin on his face. I mean, he obviously really enjoyed the fun of that. When you're an executive jet pilot, you do the whole lot. I'll load the passengers' bags on, possibly. I'll have arranged the refueling. I'll have arranged the crew's hotel accommodation. If the passenger says to me, oh, I haven't arranged a car when I get to the other end, when we land, it's me that...
You'll do that as well. Yeah.
I'll do that, absolutely. And we cover every aspect of it. And, when the passengers are gone, the cabin crew and the pilots, they go into the cabin, tidy up the cabin, clean up, vacuum the carpet.
Oh, right.
It's a whole immersion in every aspect of the operation.
How interesting was that? From rubbing shoulders with global icons to handling everything from refueling to last-minute limo bookings, the life of an executive jet pilot is anything but ordinary, don't you think? Thanks to Bob Wells for such an interesting interview, and to Nick Glover for giving us an insider's view into this exclusive world of aviation. In fact, Bob did say he could probably write a book. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did. Well, here we are yet once again. Doesn't time go fast when you're having fun? I hope we ignited some interest in the diverse topics we've covered in this episode, and it's encouraged you to learn more and then learn more again. I always say the joy of learning is learning again. I'm always a little sad when our episode is coming to an end. I'm getting so used to it now. But remember though, there's more, and it's next month. And I want to tempt you to join me again. And in order to do that, let me tell you a little bit about one of the articles that we're going to cover next month. Many of you will have heard of Bletchley Park. Yep, that would be a fair assumption. Well, we have an interview lined up for you with a very, very special lady, and she was an actual member of the top secret code-breaking operation, and she worked there during the war, helping to crack that famous Enigma code. And boy, did that shape the course of history. Thanks this time around to our guests once again for readily sharing their stories with us, and to our reporters, Joanne Watson, Martin Levin, Susie Hodges, and Bob Wells. And of course, Bob, as always, gets a special mention from me as our editor and producer. I couldn't do it without you, Bob. Please do come and keep me company next month. Same time, same place. Until then, this is Maggie West checking out. Until next time.